Ah, I have to actually do the greetings and welcome too, eh?
Get to have to.
So welcome, friends out there, colleagues, good folks that are tuning in to this episode of Shades of Life. Um, and holy smokes, does life have a lot of shades going on out there right now? We Kathy and I just are in the midst of a week of facilitating and hosting, and the people that we've been with and are going to be with the next few days have all expressed varying levels of concern, wonder, where will they be in a week? What's life going to look like for them? And and then they look to us, like we might have an answer, because we're like the facilitator. And we don't, because it's different for everybody, what they're experiencing and their worldview around it. But a question that's kind of been swirling around for me a little bit that I thought we might explore here is this notion of finding your center. And it's a phrase we often use in art of hosting about finding one's center. And what does that really mean in when there is an extraordinary amount of chaos? It's one thing to sort of find one center when things are a little bit discombobulated, a little bit wobbly, but boy, it feels more, for me, it feels more than wobbly. And I'm kind of wondering, like, what's my center look like in all of that? Yeah, I mean, I used to know, I used to have a real good sense of my quiet, and how to get there, how to find some stillness. Um, but it seems more challenging at the moment, to hold it. I might get there, but I don't know that I hold it well just yet. It's a time of mind wandering for me. And yeah, so I just sort of open that up. What is finding one's center? What does that mean? Or being centered, we like to say in art of hosting, in the fourfold practice. Find your center, be centered. What is that? In really, from my perspective, very chaotic times. So I'll end there.
And just for some context, we are here in the Shades of Life conversation at the end of February 2025.
Yes. Good news today, the asteroid's not going to hit us.
I did hear that.
They thought, there's a 3 or 4% chance, but now it's not gonna, it's gonna go by. Bye-bye.
I wouldn't know that for a couple days, Jerry, because we are avoiding, or I am avoiding, regular interaction with the outside world in the form of media. I no longer do any daily news. And all these new practices are part of trying to stay in that grounded place. Although it feels like I'm an onion being pulled apart layer by layer. And it's especially hard when we each have different ways of responding to chaos. And my response seems inactive to some people, and their response, especially if it's rage and frustration, seems to me very counterproductive, because we're just yelling back at the ones that we think are yelling at us, even though it's not always yelling. It's presenting us with difficulties. So it's trying to find that space, that place where we can each be ourselves and give each other the space to be each other, but trying to find that very, 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 very thin thread of connection. I live in a place where so many people think they know what I think. And they're wrong, but it's too much work to tell them. And I need some tools to figure out how to begin to see that thread of connection that my intellect knows is there, my heart knows it's there, but it's so jumbled up.
You ready to go, Tennyson?
Are you ready to go, Kathy?
I have some thoughts, but I can go later.
I'll keep thinking and feeling.
All right. So Jerry and I are about to go into a 2-day art of hosting intensive training, which people started signing up for like October or November before this current level of chaos. And we had the invitation for people around signing up was about rising to the moment with courage, resilience, and community. Building connection across differences, which gets to your question, Janet, that you're sitting in, and engaging courageous leadership and conversations in the midst of great uncertainty, not knowing, and heightened anxiety. And we crafted that, 6-8 months ago, and things have been increasing in the level of uncertainty and chaos. And we really seem to be in a moment of possibly great shift and transition, which could possibly go in any direction. And it's hard to know. So last week, I was working with a group of a management group at a university in Nova Scotia, and the title of the half-day workshop was From Chaos to Commitment, guiding people through change and uncertainty. And uncertainty was sort of added there at the last minute, given all that's going on. And in Canada, we have some context also around university enrollment and international students and caps on them that's creating havoc with our post-secondary institutions. So we have, all the results of the ripples from what's happening in the US, and then we have our own things that are going on. Our prime minister is stepping down, and there's a liberal leadership race. And so there's a lot of things that are going on. And one of the things that I was teaching in the half-day workshop is the change curve. And one of the things so first of all, the change curve is predicated on the grief curve. Kubler-Ross, it's from her work. And one of the key things about it is having this vision to aspire to and being like really clear on what your vision is. And someone in the room asked this very good question, which is, well, what if you don't know? What if you don't have a vision? What if you can't see it? And my response that people seem to resonate with was, well, then maybe what you need to do is focus on an intention that will carry you through this period of time that you can convey to other people. If we don't know what that future vision is or is going to be, and we don't, then how do we want to move into those spaces? And and I may have said this on our last Shades of Life call, but one of my mantras at the moment is around choice. What choices do I have? What agency do I have? And what sovereignty do I have? And if I can focus there, then I can help hold a space for other people who are struggling with these questions of uncertainty and not knowing and where are we moving into the future? And even focusing there, I can still get dragged down into the latest news of the day or the social media or whatever. I'm not completely off it, Janet, like you were indicating, but it's a much quicker read in the mornings than it used to be. Just kind of enough to touch in and then move on. And so trying to be in the practice of, yep, going there right now. How do I just even like not even be concerned about going somewhere else, but just stop the going there. And I'll stop there for the moment. Oh, I'll just say one more thing. In Lord of the Rings, there's this quote that from Frodo and Gandalf, this conversation. And yeah, I need to find it. But I've been using it as a reference point for the conversations that I'm in. And it is basically, Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. And Gandalf says, so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
You're done there, right, Kathy? Okay, I'll pick up. Going back to where you started, Jerry, was something about center and finding center. I feel like I'm not holding it well. So that's not something I really want to say, but it's also true. And it's also a bit confusing to me because I feel like I feel like I'm pretty I don't know what word to use, but it moving around a bunch. Like, oh yeah, pretty centered. Everything, you got it. And then 32 minutes later, I don't even know where that was anymore. So I don't really like saying that, but I realize that's true, and I'm hearing that from a few other people also. So then it puts me into the question of, well, what's my version of holding to a center? And I feel like I'm trying to figure that out. I'm told by some that I'm talking about coaching calls and some of those things, the groups that I've been convening, that I hold a good center. And I'm sort of glad to hear that. That actually helps me feel like I'm centered. And then there's the 32 minutes later version again, where I feel like, gosh, I just like why is this so sporadic or erratic? That's the word I'm looking for. Um, I like the vision intention thing that you just shared, Kathy. Uh, Vision is inspiring. It's a bit imposing too. But like, holy shit, man, I don't know. I'm just trying to be in the day. So I think the intention is one that helps me. I feel like there's some showing up that I try to do. Well, show up whoever it's with. I feel like I'm living something that's a bit of a difference between what I prepare for and then what's present. So
Mm.
in the calls that I've been a part of, where I've had some role and need to be sharing some things, there's a part of me that's really trying to prepare well for those things. And it also feels like I'm missing the just showing up in the moment stuff. I mean, it's one of the things we do here. We don't script things out. We don't even prepare a topic. We just show up and be with it. And I kind of like that. I always feel like I don't know how to connect all of the bits of the story together. And there's a part of me that wants to do that better, but I'm trying to just be okay with seeing one or two parts of the bigger story. And one that I would bring into today is the recent stuff, because earlier this morning I hosted a group. I created this thing called Wander School, and we're meeting online and using some questions basically to ask, like, how are you and what has your attention and why do you think that might have your intention? And today was the first gathering of people under that heading anyway. I felt like I was offering in the old art of hosting days a knowledge camp. I want to do a knowledge camp on wandering and the benefit of wandering and the invitation to wander. Well, what happened in that call, this comes back to some of the tool stuff, Janet, is I think it just gave people a place to share their story in a pace or depth that they often don't have. And the outcome of that is, I think, some real relating to each other. So there's some witness, and then there's just relating to each other. And the not so new thing that, I can find myself in your story, and you can find yourself in my story, and how comforting that is, or connecting that is, or maybe centering that is. So I find myself living in a lot of the things that we're talking about and bouncing around in it quite a bit, and then trying to come back to, well, I don't know about all that other stuff, but I know for 90 minutes, that little pocket of people that was online together, we seemed to find something that moved us. I think I'm counting on those things. Let me pause there.
Thank you. And one of the things I love about this call that we're on is the sort of sparkiness that takes each of us, wherever we go, in listening to the others. And a couple things that have just struck me in where we are. Some of it is partly because I have art hosting on my mind right now, but I often quote you, Tennyson, on this when teaching chaotic stepping stones, and we get to principles, and I'll just say to people, when it all goes to shit, it's principles that hold us together.
Wait, I said that?
You did. And I like it because it's so true. And so the question I'm asking myself is a bit as what are my principles or values that hold me together, hold my center, and how much time of late have I given some real thought to that? What is that holds one together, me together? And so, because it feels like it's all going to shit out, but, to me, and so that's just one thing that just kind of sparked here, that, and we just use that when we we're doing the strategic planning on Monday about what are the values of the organization that are going to guide this plan, and again, I referenced the Tennyson's quote because of the importance of the values or principles here in guiding the work. But the other thing is that it's slightly a little different, but that's kind of spark for me is we're going to teach, I think Kathy's going to teach it, but chaotic path. And, we have a tendency to draw it out linearly, and then one on the far left typically is homos, destructive chaos, and on the far right is control or even extreme control. And I've always talked about those two things with examples that were external to my life or world. The extreme control of Mubarak in Egypt, and the revolution and then the chaos that ensued that became destructive, and then they swung back again to control and the Muslim Brotherhood and so on. But there's another way to think about it is more of a circle. So the extreme control and chaos meets. And just like chaos and order overlap, and we talk about it as the chaotic path, if destructive chaos and extreme control meet and overlap, what's that overlap? And I'm beginning to wonder if we're not right in that at the moment. Part of what makes part of what got Trump elected was people desiring some form of control over their lives. Like they felt they needed somebody to bring an order there that they didn't have or didn't see. That's this authoritarianism that we're seeing emergent. But we're certainly seeing plenty of chaos. So those things are there at the moment. And so in thinking about how we might offer chaotic path, now we're almost really living it in a way that I've not used personally in my describing at least the extreme ends of control. I've talked about control and bureaucracy. I worked at a university. We had plenty of rules to control our behavior, but not like I feel now, like in the confusion of this intersection between extreme chaos and extreme control. It feels a messy place. I'll end there.
I feel compelled. Background. I live physically among people that would fit in the category that you would put under the umbrella of wanting control. I do not see that. I think that's how it looks to someone outside. What they want is to break what isn't working for them. And I keep coming back to sometimes the only way to start over is to break, whether it's personally. If your marriage is not working, we choose to get out of it, and that's breaking. And it causes a lot of disturbance for people in our lives, including us. I feel like for the past 8 years, I have tried to interpret people who live near me who are being evaluated as being something that I don't see them being. And I don't have that many interactions with the broader world. So there aren't opportunities by design to do that. I have to wait for them to show up. So again, I am in this middle place of how to be that in the world when I think the world needs it. But I've also abandoned being a fixer.
I'm intrigued, Janet, by the people being evaluated by a certain perspective or worldview, and that's not what you're seeing of the people. Like, do you think they're being judged unfairly or something?
I think they're being seen through a lens that is only partly accurate.
Mm.
And
That
we
makes
have
sense.
them.
Right. This is what Jerry and I talk about through the worldview perspective, is that we will often make judgments about people through a slice of a worldview that we see or think we see. And yet individually, we're all multidimensional human beings. And in a way, what you say is definitely unfair to any one individual to judge them just by a piece of what we see or think we see. And also like want to be clear about that. We're not always seeing, like what we think we see is not always what we do see. So perceptions, beliefs, whatnot. And part of the challenge of these moments is to do that, like to move out beyond the you're this because I see this piece of you, or you voted a certain way, or I think you voted a certain way. I may not even know
Yes.
that for
Yeah.
sure. And so so it's an interesting challenge, I think, because now I'm kind of thinking about individually and perspectives we have individually, and then just also thinking about what Jerry was describing around chaos, order, stifling control, extreme chaos, and really how that comes together. I did also introduce that to the group I was teaching last week, this whole notion, and they felt some relief just in the naming of these different, we sometimes refer to them as worldview perspectives as well. And someone did note that, oh, what if it was like a bracelet and these two things came together? And it's an interesting question about what does lie in that intersection between extreme chaos and extreme control. We can speculate about that. And I think right now, with the degree of chaos that many of us feel or perceive in the world, it's even harder to move beyond the, I think you're this because of my assumptions or beliefs about you. It's harder for some people to be more generous in their thoughts or perspectives of another person. And something someone said earlier, which I don't remember exactly what it is, but there's this, and this is the line that Jerry and I are walking a little bit, which is there's everything that's going on all around us and we can't ignore it. It's going to show up in the room. And if we try to pretend it's not there, it's not going to serve anyone. And yet with that is also this desire to just keep going. I'm still doing engagement. I'm still posting meetings. I'm still whatever. And so like, help me be as resourced as possible to be able to do those things. And I think that is a little bit like what Tenneson was saying about erraticness of it. One moment I'm in the overwhelm of everything, and the next moment I'm in the, I gotta host that meeting tomorrow. So how am I gonna do that? Okay, I'll stop there for now. I kind of feel like that's a little bit all over the place, but there's so many threads woven into this.
I think we could rename this conversation all over the place. And that would work. And
Yes.
I think we're supposed to be all over the place, to be clear, right? Like, I think we're supposed to throw things out there and see how they connect, because it's not every environment that we're in that we're able to connect those things. So yay for that. In that spirit, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is through whatever email, something, something earlier in the week, there was a piece from Adrienne Marie Brown. And the line that stood out to me in my skimming of things that way was, things aren't getting worse, they're getting uncovered.
Yes.
I like that line. Like that one stands out to me. Why does it stand out to me? Because shit's been going down for a long, 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 long time. And now we're just seeing more of it. And I feel a little flippant even in saying it that way, because it sounds like such a distant observation, but it lands in the reality of, I don't know if I'll have my job tomorrow. I don't know if I'll get that check in the mail. All of those kinds of unknowns. I think there's something fruitful in the framing of, it's always been there, it's just getting uncovered. That sort of changes how I approach things. Second is I had a person who I've met through some circle work over the years, and haven't talked to her for probably 3 years, but she emailed me and said, could we talk? And she's a person who lives in Washington, D.C., and she works and lives amongst many people who are employed or questioning their employment with the federal government. And in her goodness, she's saying, look, I'm just going to have a few people over to my house and I want to host a circle. And what she was asking me is what to do if questions, what do I do if it sort of starts running away? Or what do I do if it starts getting intense? Now she's a person who's got some circle skill and everything, so I think she was really looking for the comfort of a friend slash colleague to bounce a few ideas off of. And one of the things I shared with her is that it feels to me like more and more and more, and I don't know what is the accurate narrative here. In times of utter chaos, extreme chaos, big change, whatever it is, it just feels like the dynamic is we need more layers of witness together. So, if
Mm.
you start a conversation in her context with, well, what are we going to do with all the shit that's going down? It sort of steers it in that direction, right? And that can be a useful circle. And maybe it depends on who's coming into the room and all of that kind of stuff. But what I was suggesting that compels me is we need to get really good at backing up and just asking a question that's behind or aside the ones that we might normally ask. Yeah, how are you doing as a human being? Or how are you doing as a leader? Or how are you doing, comma, really? Because it seems to me as the intensity grows, whether it be the getting worse or just getting uncovered, what we miss is the opportunity to just, kind of say that this is what it's like to be me right now, in this context, in this job, in this community, in this skin color, any of that kind of stuff. So, I think there's part of me that wishes I had a bigger magic wand or a magic wand with more reach even. But something about just the skill, I'm trying to come back to, well, what can I contribute in these places? It seems that being able to ask that question so that there's a temporary legitimacy to just share how you doing, seems to bring something healthy. And then from there, I hope, oh, maybe now we can try something else. But maybe that alone is enough. Like when I think of my friend in Washington, D.C. there, that's probably enough. If they have an evening where they got to share a little bit and be seen and heard a little bit, in a well-held, lightly structured circle together, chances are that's a big thing. That's what stirs in me.
I also think it opens the door that we can only figure it out together.
Mm.
And we're so used to someone having an answer that we're uncomfortable when there is no answer. And the example I use with people in my life is that nature does okay without us, where I am in my woods. The trees fall down and it looks like they're dead, but they're providing shelter for something else to grow. And maybe we're just seeing the trees fall down and we're not going to see the new growth yet. But we can't go running in and pick up every downed tree. I mean, and people say, well, what do you believe? I say, the only thing I believe in is nature because it's the only thing that hasn't lied to me yet. And if we can come back to the natural world, I think it gives us examples of how to be with each other. I also think it's a time where everything we were taught from the time we were little, it can't be true. So what is true?
Mm.
And I keep going back further and further in time. And for example, when people complain about, well, we're going to turn into a country that only values oligarchs. Being my cynical self, I say, well, did you forget? This country was founded by rich white men who wanted to stay rich white men. And they laugh and say, oh, I never looked at it that way. But it's bringing that, well, let's stand over here and see what we see from standing over here, because we don't want to stop seeing what we've seen, what we always thought was true. And that's what's making it all crazy, is because we don't know what we can rely on. Where are the principles? But we only find that out by going through the chaos together.
Can I jump in one more time, Jerry, or you? I feel like we're popcorning a little bit here, but I feel like I have to simplify the shit out of things. And even when I say the shit out of things, it sort of gives me permission to really try to be simple. Um, I feel like, I'm a person that likes to speak at pretty high level of values and aspirations, and I think those things matter in the world. But maybe the simplifying that I might be looking for is a principle of it's better for me to stay in relationship with you than not. It's better for me to at least remain curious with my neighbors than not at all. Like I feel like there's some level of that is meaning something. And I get it, in a cognitive way, there's some relationships where it is best to hightail it out of there and get out. But as a general working principle, I probably ought to remain in relationship with you than saying fuck off. Well, that's strong to me. And then I'm staring at this quote on the wall because sometimes I put things up on the wall in my collaged way of being. I think it's a Mark Nepo one. To my dear friends who have stayed in the conversation, together we somehow see into the center. To my dear friends who have stayed in the conversation. So the principle of, well, do your best to stay in the conversation rather than run away from it or hide from it or be embarrassed in it or whatever it is. Stay in the conversation. Together we somehow see into the center. That holds a principle to me. There's a better chance of seeing something useful, fruitful, life-giving by staying in relationship rather than moving away from it. God damn.
One of the quotes that Kathy and I use a lot when we're doing things, and I'm not sure the origin of it, but it may be Christine or Anne or maybe something elsewhere, but it's in that theme of we live into the stories we tell. And what are those stories that we want to tell now? And the funny example I give about that is a person I know who is my age, but in his first job out of college, 50 years ago, was a school teacher, and he has this story about teaching a religions class in some small North Dakota town. And I know that story he tells now, which he believes is 100% true, is not what really happened there 50 years ago in that classroom. Because I've listened to this story for 40 years and heard it evolve, but he's lived into it. It's his alive story. Part of what I think about that is the where we facilitated on Monday was in an old schoolhouse that been rescued. This schoolhouse was, if you've been in any small town schoolhouse that's sat there for, I think it was for 30, 40 years, and the mess they become, it's an abandoned building. And in the town that's in now is like 48 people or something. And it's just, two women had a dream. And it was to find an old schoolhouse and turn it into, they are in the business of wool. One raises sheep and one is a master creator of wool for yarn or this or that. And they wanted to create a schoolhouse where people that were, or a place where people that were in that world could come and learn and work together and weave and understand all of this. And it's an amazing little facility. It feels like the schoolhouse that it once was, and it's got a place for food and for meetings, but it's still its primary function is around this learning center for this field of working with wool. But they created a story and lived into it. And it took a long time for that story to be alive in that building, and many different things showed up to it. But they, as Kathy said earlier, held an intention. They held a story. And I think we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of a story that doesn't serve us well. That what is this, even if it's not clear, what the final chapter looks like, or what's the story we want to be living into, the story we want to be telling. And I do think part of that'll be alive in the next 2 days, because I think art of hosting opens up the space for telling a story of hope and belief and possibility. And you can hear it in what people wrote about why they're coming to the training. Surely they want to add their facilitation skills and toolbox and this and that, but there's an element in all of that of a possibility of hope, of creating conversations that matter for people, to coin a phrase. But yeah, so I just let it rest there. What's the story we want to live into, and the trap we need to avoid as we do that? So
I definitely hear you in the story piece, and that's the pre-direction I want to go in. But I think that some of my reality is I live in the space of hopes and fears. So, and the fears contradict the story I want to live in. And the story I want to live into seems like, is it grounded in reality at all? So just picking up a couple of threads that people have put down here. Things are not getting worse, they're getting uncovered. Totally believe that. And then I wrote a note next to that illusions are being shattered. Like whatever illusions we've lived into, or some of those stories that we've lived into, it's hard not to see that breakdown, or whatever that is. And this notion, Janet mentioned this about people wanting to break what isn't working for them. And that is true. And then when I think about, my hope is that with this crazy incursion into all of the national systems of the United States, feels like there's a lot of tearing down that's happening. And we all know that systems change is not easy work. And what we do when we want to change a system is we build onto it. We don't take it down to its bare bones and start over again. So the hope is that this actually creates the space for the emergence of something new and better, for those systems and whatever systems they're impacting, because it's cascading unintended consequences kind of impact. So I think that is entirely possible. The fear is that there won't be anything left to build from, or the other fear is that the quote unquote wrong people will be building what we're going to be living into. So I find myself in this space of, I believe that this about the illusions being shattered and things being uncovered, and that creates the opportunity to see more clearly, and possibly to develop and create more clearly. I also 100% believe that the dark shines light, also vice versa. In the spiritual realms, the more light there is, the harder the dark fights. definitely feels true for me in this moment. And then there's something that I think I knew about a long time ago and has come back into my awareness around the fourth wave. And so if we are at this point of destruction and chaos, it could be the verge of moving into the fourth wave, which is a much better set of values, principles, and structures to build on and out from, which actually, if I want to believe into that story, which I do, that means that the world that's going to emerge from this chaos is going to be so much better for my kids and my grandkids than I could have imagined possible. And that is, so much, if you follow the thread of the chaos, then the imagining of what the world's going to be like for them is awful. But if you follow the thread of the fourth wave, in that this is going to launch a next level of light, a next level of spiritual development, a next level of dimensions to live into, that's an incredibly optimistic story. So that's where I find myself in the balance of these two things. And then I think also, like, thinking about the work we're going into and the work that I've been involved in the last couple of days, there is also this balance when we're holding this space for other people and leading these spaces of acknowledging the reality and offering people hope or practices that they can use to continue to take their next steps into whatever they're taking their next steps into.
I love it. I love it that you two are going into that for the art of hosting space for everything that it creates that way. Because I'm kind of imagining that, like you said, Jerry, people show up and they say, I want tools and, I want to learn how to work with conflict and things like that. And when it gets really exciting to me is at whatever point during, if you've got the 2-day format, maybe some people are starting to arrive there at lunch or the afternoon, or maybe the next morning, where they say, oh, I thought this was going to be this thing, but really what it is this. And to me, I take that as as a great outcome. We lift up the priority of, we prioritize relationship and the learning that can come from that, and sometimes even some experiments that come from that. So I think it's awesome that you're going into it that way. When I think of yeah, I've been in one of the programs that I'm part of is working with pastors, and there's a week-long curriculum that happened last November, and then this year there's built-in follow-up coaching with these people. And it's small, there's 10 people. But with the coaching with these people, I've been following up with some of them and arranging the calls and having the calls. And a little part of me, I'm qualifying, a part of me has been thinking, did they get anything out of that week together? Like we meant to do this. And it's basically art of hosting modified for a group of 10 pastors over 5 days together. Well, in these phone calls, I've been amazed at the little things that they've been saying. I take it I take it seriously, but not so heavy. It's like, oh my gosh, people, do a check-in. When you start a meeting, do a check-in. It'll change your world, I promise. Well, sure enough, they've been doing stuff like that. And the way they reflected back is, oh, Tenneson, thanks so much for that tool. I team teach it with another guy named Travis, but they'll say, thanks for giving us that tool. I Maybe that says something about the hunger of the people to be able to contribute in some way that is helpful, life-giving, life-affirming, and good. So I hear it in what you're speaking, Kathy. And whether it's a vision or an intention, if we just create a little more connection with one another, some good things can arise out of that. I see the heads nodding here for that. And I know that, and I guide people on that, and yet I still need to remember that in the company of some others. Holy moly.
It always helps to get feedback because you never really know where things are landing in any given moment. So
Totally surprised me, you know. It's delighted too. So
I do have to share this funny little story about check-ins that we just heard from one of the people that we were working with, who's working on the check-in questions. Or, you know, every now and then we'll ask the check-in question of how are you arriving to this meeting? And she said people are looking at her like, I drove here.
well, right. Got dropped off by a
She
drone.
persisted.
One of the things that always amazes me, um, and I'm glad that it does, is that opening circle, and how a group of, well, the last one we did, we had 21 people that did, you know, only a few knew each other, and they went into conversations they didn't expect to go into. And I mean, it just seems to happen all of the time. Yeah, and you know, it's the power of the circle, certainly. And and I think that it's what do we something is uncovered that was always there, to come back to what you said, Janet, but some things uncovered. I want to just share a little bit of the story as sort of my way to check out here. Because it's something I hadn't thought about in a long time and kind of emerged here. So my grandfather was a man of deep faith. And his life, he would go sit in shopping malls and witness to anybody that sat next to him. Sometimes we might have been a little like, grandpa's, you know, here we go again. But you know, he volunteered as a preacher in rural country churches. He helped rebuild a couple of them that were falling down so that they could be in these look. He was a man of deep faith, of which I never really fully understood, and of which we had some ferocious conversations about, especially when I was a more obnoxious teenager, questioning all that stuff. But he told a story about when, you know, how he came to his belief system. Was he was a young man, and at a time when you worked on farms and you had everything was horse drawn and animals, and a horse was injured and bleeding out, and a person that was part of a crew laid hands on the horse and healed the horse. And so my grandfather saw this miracle, and it transformed his life. And why I share this, because I've never doubted that story, ever. I've doubted this whole thing. I've argued with him about faith and religion and, you know, what happens when babies, all kinds of stupid arguments. But I've never doubted that story. And it's, you know, it's a transformative story. And how many, you know, I'm just wondering about carrying those stories around with us that are in our lives or in someone else's life that was transformative for them, and what it means for our own beliefs in what can happen out there. But never once have I ever doubted that story. I'm that's me.
Jerry, you remind me of one of the people I follow on Facebook, Sean Dietrich, or Sean of the South, and he's a storyteller. And he shares stories of angels and other people's stories. And I mean, I just find him an amazing storyteller and an amazing person, because he tells stories about some of the animals and the people in his life that are quite remarkable. And many times when I've been working with people lately, I have been sharing with them the people I look to for what I consider to be knowledgeable news, to just keep track of things, and also the people that I feel inspired by. And those are some of the ways that I keep trying to find my own center as we work through the chaos. And I have an enormous amount of gratitude for the people that I get to work with in the next couple of days, and that I have worked with over the last couple of weeks, and the people who show up looking for hope, inspiration, ideas to make the world around them a better place. And so that's where I've returned to in our conversation here today, and what I know I'll be bringing into the next 2 days with these 30 people from across the country who are showing up looking for community connection and wanting to be a force for good in the world.
I check out. Good luck in the next couple of days, by the way. Like, do good, do your good. I think ripples matter. So do some good ripples. My way of checking out, I think, when I try to make sense of all these things, when I try to find my own center, when I try to invite people into their center from my center, I'm often coming over to more poetic words, and on the collage of things that move around on my wall, it's a Mary Oliver quote. I'll just end with this one. "What can I say that I have not said before?" says Mary Oliver. So I'll say it again. The leaf has a song in it. Stone is the face of patience. Inside the river, there is an unfinished story, and you are somewhere in it, and it will never end until it all ends. I find that to be inspiring. Thanks for today.
Got any last words, Janet?
I will check out with 2 words: inspire and invite.
Mm,
I've been thinking about what can I create, but if it's what can I invite, it's entirely different.
mm, mm.
And I need to sit with that a bit, but it's very cool. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, friends, in community and in connection.